All right, welcome to Cwic Show, another late night recording here. Just wanted to make sure we got this out for you tomorrow. However, I felt that this was also a very impactful address. It is President Oaks and Elder Clark Gilbert. Many of you may not know who he is, but you'll get an introduction here if you don't. They gave the devotional at Ensign College in Salt Lake City. It's a college owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And what I want to show here is, well, a few things. But I do believe, for those of you that have been concerned, that there is a message that is coming out stronger and stronger and stronger about identity and how it is that we need to focus on our identity as a child of God. And instead of having these smaller identities overcome, right, raise up in that identity values hierarchy above those identities of as, boy, if I can remember the three, as President Nelson went over on Sunday, as number one, a child of God, number two, a child of the covenant, which I thought was interesting. I didn't address that. I had never thought of that as an identity. So that's something that I need to really internalize and focus on, the child of the covenant. And then third, I believe, was a disciple of Christ. So he kind of sneaks in that, for me, it was kind of sneaking in the child of the covenant in with a child of God and what I would have, and most of us, I think, would have naturally thought of being a disciple of Christ. But this is a follow-up message to that. And President Oaks and Elder Gilbert, they come in and they say, and I'm going to show you a few clips from this, but they come in originally in this address and they say that they want to reaffirm President Nelson's message. You know, right? They're being catapulted off of what was brought up in President Nelson's message on Sunday. And again, this is to young adults. It's to everyone, but this is where this needs to land. President Oaks says that they are reaffirming President Nelson's message, including the truth of who we are and the destiny he has designed for us. He goes on and says that President Nelson taught us the foundation for all the young adults and others. What we should be doing, we must stand fast. And this is more and more the message that is coming out. Stand fast against adversity. The adversity is severe. And we need to learn to stand against it. I really think that for those that can adopt, you know, there's obviously the peer pressure, and it's so hard when you're younger. It's hard for everyone, but especially when you're younger, the peer pressure is a difficult thing to work with. But if we can get a message out there, as these brethren are, that is part of your purpose. Right? It's part of your purpose to be able to take on the mission of standing fast. And as they're going to say here shortly, of proclaiming truth. Understand the fulfilling nature of being a disciple of Christ, of being a child of the covenant, of being a child of God. But he says, we must stand fast against the values and practices that draw us away from the Lord's teachings and our covenants. That's not hard to find today. What are the things that draw us away from the teachings of the Lord and from our covenants? And then he says this, we can do this with love. He adds that in, and I think that is crucial to understand, because in our environment today, it is very easy to do these things in not the best spirit. And I'm guilty of this sometimes. So he says we can do this with love. He goes on and says Christ's pattern of standing fast with love. And he gives several different points here. But he says, rather than condemning others, we should simply proclaim what we know and what we believe. So this is another principle that, look, I've tried to do somewhat on this podcast. Those of you that have followed this, I try not to name names. I usually don't, because I think that's the right thing. And I get a lot of pushback on that. But there are other ways to take care of these things. That doesn't mean you're being passive. There are other things to do. What we want to do is create awareness, and then whatever we can do to support changes. And when we talk about social media and technology now and the ability to get out to thousands and thousands of people and other individuals that are teaching false doctrines, it's a new territory to walk. And it's a tightrope to some degree, I think, because if someone's really, really public and against the teachings of the church and they're attacking the brethren, well, again, we're going to go over a couple of qualifiers here that President Oaks goes over. Now, there's a lot here, and I don't want you to just listen to my words when I'm done with this. Please click on the link that I will have in the description box and listen to this for yourself. It's wonderful. It is this is manna, right? This is good stuff. But he goes over a few different ways that good is called evil and evil is called good, and that we're told that this is what's going to happen in the last days a lot, and it's going to be very confusing.
Second is the pervasive sense of intellectual supremacy that exists in society, and especially in colleges and universities. President Spencer W. Kimball responded to this when he stated that we must become a bastion of righteousness, resisting the, quote, invading ideologies that seek control of curriculum as well as classroom.
Wow.
We do not resist such ideas because we fear them, he said, but because they are false.
Okay, so I want to make, and by the way, you see here, this is Elder Gilbert to President Oaks' left here. I want to cover just a couple of points that he made there. I mean, that is prophetic. And of course, it was happening during the times of President Kimball. I mean, look, I'm an old man. President Kimball is the one who called me on a mission. So it was happening back then also. But look at what they're saying here, right? He talks about, President Oaks brings in the idea of the intellectual supremacy in colleges and universities, and then goes to President Spencer W. Kimball about becoming a bastion of righteousness, resisting the invading ideologies that seek control of curriculum. This is happening at a breakneck speed. It's already happened in most universities. There's attempts we've seen at BYU and successes at BYU of having this happen, but we see it even worse. We see this in the K-12 space throughout the country. And then President Kimball says, we do not resist such ideas because we fear them. So when I am speaking out there about these things, what I get a lot from people is, oh, you're a fearmonger. You're trying to create fear. He says, we do not resist such ideas because we fear them, but because they are false. Now, I want to go to President Oaks again here on point number 3 about an upside-down world here.
The third influence is the tendency of those who call good evil to bully or shout down or put negative labels on those who disagree. They seek to intimidate them by shaming or silencing opposition to their untruths.
Okay. Well, you've heard us talk about that a lot. And if you didn't know before watching things here, you know what that is. You know what that means. And then, yes, that can happen on either side. It certainly can. And he's going to talk about, civility here in a bit. But in talking directly about academia here, and the invading ideologies, and then shouting people down and putting labels on individuals where they disagree, and shame. Right? We've talked a lot about that. The shame that gets thrown at people to put them into a spiraling silence. Right? We've talked about that. Okay, then Elder Gilbert's going to go on and talk about Korihor. That's very interesting. You should go and watch that. And then, of course, these ideologies that are invading, one of their targets that so many people won't believe. They just won't believe it. But one of their major targets is the family. There are others here, and there are three here that President Oaks is going to talk about. But let's go to Elder Gilbert here, who is going to introduce this. Now, this introduction from Elder Gilbert is coming off of a candid camera that I'm not going to show you here. You need to go to the video to see this, about being able to not fall to peer pressure and to stand in the right direction. It's pretty funny, actually. But that's what he's referring to here.
Despite the humor of that video, you are going to have to learn to turn and face the right way in the elevator, even when everyone else is telling you to turn around and face the back. In your heart, you'll know this can't be the right thing they're doing, but you have to have the courage to stand fast, looking in the right direction.
Such a great message.
Now, President Oaks, in the last 3 general conferences, you have spoken about issues related to the family, religion, and the Constitution. What is it about these institutions that are so important to the church?
This is key.
Thank you. The family is a core institution of civil society. As we read in the Family Proclamation, it is, quote, central to the Creator's plan for the eternal destiny of his children, unquote. Of course, the adversary will attack such a central part of the plan and try to persuade the children of God to depart from it. Religion. Religion stands as a firewall against the adversary's onslaughts on many other key institutions or ideas in the world.
Family, religion.
We know from experience that the teachings and practices of religion strengthen society generally. As for the Constitution, the Constitutional Bill of Rights guarantees protect the good that religious believers and their churches, synagogues, and mosques can do. These protections include the precious freedoms of speech, conscience, and the free exercise of religion.
Okay, so think about what they're doing here. Again, if you go through and you study how they've outlined this, they're talking about these ideologies. They're talking about a standing fast in the face of these untruths. And then they bring up the family, 1, the religion, 2, and the Constitution, 3. Why are they talking about those 3 things? In my mind, this is my estimation. Obviously, this is all my opinion, right? But in my estimation, it is because these are the 3 places that are not only the most important, but they're the ones that are under attack from these same ideologies. We've talked about these things. The ideologies that we talk about directly attack those 3 areas. They know that. And you can see that when you go through and understand, to me, how they're organizing this and the message that they are starting to put out. Then President Oaks is going to talk about ways that we can stand fast with love. And he goes over a few things. He talks about contention. But one of the main things he talks about here is the idea of proclaiming truth. That we have to learn to stand fast and proclaim truth. And I think that that's something we are, in our society, we've been getting away from. Well, not our society, not just our society, in the church. We've been getting away from. We need to proclaim the truth. And I think there's so much of an attack from new sources of information and these new ideologies that we're almost swimming in a sea of confusion sometimes. And I'm guessing that some of you have felt that way. I felt that way. But there is a lighthouse. And that lighthouse is to bring us back to the port that we know we're supposed to be at, which is standing fast on the truths and the doctrine of the church and of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and what our true identity is. One thing that he covers that I think is really important here is he says that he's urging members to stand clear from the current atmosphere of hate and personal meanness in communications. So he talks about the problem of contention and creating contention. And then he says, look, the issues, though he's not talking about policies, right? He's saying the policies need to be debated. We need to talk about these things, is exactly what he says. But not doing it in a spirit of hate, and not doing it with personal meanness, right? Just going after an individual specifically, their character and demeaning another individual, right? That's the wrong thing to do. So I think that's a very important message. All right, now he's going to bring up racism. And some of you have a problem with this. And I understand that. Like it's being talked about too much, it's being brought up too much, but I want to explain something that I see at least. And that is that there is to some people in the church, there is a sense that the church is simply and always kowtowing to culture around it. And that it is simply moving through, the waves of their own peer pressure, so to speak, in society. And I'm not saying that doesn't ever happen. I'm not saying that there isn't a play between those two forces to some degree. But this is the right thing. This is the right thing to do. And if you follow the podcast, that I have supported the agreement and the relationship with the NAACP since the beginning. And many people don't like it because it's a very political organization, and it hasn't always stood on principles that are in agreement with doctrine, the doctrine of the church, the doctrine of the gospel. Okay, that's all true. But it's not a political. This is not a political agreement. This is not a political relationship. And it is bearing fruit immensely. This is not an agreement with the NAACP because the brethren are kowtowing to political pressures of racism and blackmail or something. That is such a cynical approach. Look, Jesus sat with the sinners, and we can learn things from the NAACP. Don't worry, I'm not talking political issues. I'm talking about experience. And we can make new friends, important friends that help bring many people to the gospel, not because we are compromising our principles, but because we are welcoming them into open arms and into friendship and fellowship. So listen to what President Oaks has to say about racism, and then I'm going to go to one more clip.
Brothers and sisters, I now address the subject of race. We must start in dealing with this subject by recognizing the very real challenges of racism, by condemning ongoing racial prejudice, and by strengthening those who continue to face unfair biases. Okay, so many of you are thinking to yourself, well, look, I already do this. I'm not, why do we keep talking about this? Why is this being brought up? And please understand it as there is a problem, right? It's not as big as what many people in the U.S. try to make it be, right? They're trying to pull open a
mostly healed wound, not the church, others, are trying to pull back open a mostly healed wound and have us focus on it over and over and over again. But there are issues of racism, and you have to remember, this is a global church. This is a global church. It is not just the U.S. that the brethren are speaking to when they talk about racism, especially in General Conference. They are creating a message that says we all need to become one. And if you are in another country and you have racist feelings for other individuals, what is going to happen down the road as we bring in different races and ethnicities and cultures into the church as we gather Israel? You know what's going to happen? They're going to break back apart unless we are preemptive in trying to lower these boundaries and these barriers as we gather Israel and let God prevail. Now I'm going to show you something that is part of this address that was just recently stated by Brother Amos Brown of the NAACP and a good friend of President Nelson.
Reverend Amos Brown is a noted civil rights leader and a friend of President Russell M. Nelson. He recently wrote this, quote, "We can gripe about the way things were. We can refuse to acknowledge all the good going on now. But these approaches will not heal our national divisions. As Jesus taught, we don't eradicate evil with more evil. We love generously and live mercifully even toward those we think to be our enemies." That's the end of the quote from Reverend Amos Brown.
Okay, and then watch or listen here to Reverend Amos Brown on with his remarks on the open house recently of the Washington, D.C. temple.
Mr. Joseph Smith, the first prophet, also ran for the presidency of the United States in 1844. But the major plank in his platform was the abolition of slavery by 1850. Thus, preceding Mr. Abraham Lincoln, even before he exhibited the courage to sign that Emancipation Proclamation. But fast forward to 2021. Thank God that one President Nelson lived out the intent and the spirit of Joseph Smith when he reached out to the NAACP. He said, "We want to talk. We want to have conversation. We want to be enlightened about each other's experiences."
He reached out to the NAACP. President Nelson did.
And I assure you that if all of the so-called religious groups in this nation would follow the example of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we shall save the soul of America.
All right. Wow. Don't tell me that this isn't bearing the right kind of fruit. This is a major leader in the NAACP. And I don't think he's being two-faced about this at all, right? This is a real relationship. This is real friendship. And this is exciting. This is exciting. Don't be skeptical about this. He then goes on and talks about same-sex attraction. And right, again, these are things that are tied to a lot of these identitarian ideologies and how we need to walk through them. There is a proper way. It is not shut the door on race. It is not shut the door to those of same-sex attraction. It is open your arms, welcome, love, have tolerance up to not compromising the gospel principles, and then back that all up with understanding that we don't move the goalposts here, right? For this identitarianism, the goalposts don't move.
We encourage our students, our teachers, and all our members to to avoid extreme or polarizing positions and teachings that undermine the U.S. Constitution and other core institutions. We know that the Constitution was inspired of God, despite its birth defect of slavery. Showing respect does not mean we walk away from our beliefs and fundamental doctrine on the family and its importance to God's plan for the eternal destiny of His children, as revealed in the Family Proclamation. Please remember the responsibility we,
I like this,
members of the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12, have as apostles of the Lord Jesus Christ. We must declare the truth as God has revealed it.
Again, I think that that sea that I talked about, being out of that sea and wondering, and am I going under? Is the church going under? There hasn't always been a clarification and a lot of statements that have been made that is starting to come more and more and more. And there is true doctrine. There is an anchor. There is the gospel of Jesus Christ. These men are called of God. They are prophets, seers, and revelators. And I don't see anywhere where they are planning to move the goalposts because of political and cultural pressures. I think we need to look at what they're doing, and instead of some people, being cynical in their approach to the relationships that they're making, understand where they are trying to go as the church goes more and more global. And not that we want, some people think that if we're going global, we're going outside of the U.S. and there's all these other influences that somehow that means a compromise in our doctrine. It does not mean a compromise in our doctrine. It means that we need to learn now how to be a church that welcomes everybody, and that we can limit the boundaries and barriers that might be set between different groups of people. But don't take it from me. Go to the link, please, right? I just go to the link and watch this for yourself. Go to the source. I don't have many clips here of Elder Gilbert. He's fabulous. And feel the spirit for yourself from this. And see for yourself if what they're saying isn't true. And see for yourself if you're not able to grab on to a little bit more, I think, of the vision that they have of moving forward. Thanks for your time.